Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now, South African authorities have recovered at least 60 bodies from an abandoned gold mine in Stilfontein, with hundreds more men feared trapped underground. The mine was the site of a deadly siege that began in August when police cut off food and water supplies to force illegal miners to the surface. Rescue operations, which involve using a metal cage to retrieve survivors and bodies from the 2-kilometer deep mine shaft, are expected to continue for days. So far, 82 survivors have been pulled out and arrested for illegal mining, with 2 facing additional charges for possession of gold. Now, the siege is part of a larger operation aimed at combating the illicit precious metals trade, estimated to be worth $3.17 billion last year. Today, we'll focus on balancing the state's efforts with the protection of human life and dignity, the economic impact and policy, and also the legislative reforms. And joining us to discuss this, we have 2 gentlemen, Ghaleb Kachalia, former Shadow Minister, Parliament of the Republic of South Africa. We also have Zama Ntshona, National Spokesperson, African Transformative Movement, all the way from South Africa. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the conversation.
Good day.
All right, so let me begin with you, Mr. Kachalia. First of all, what is your reaction to the government's approach in Stilfontein? You know, the loss of so many lives is deeply tragic. Do you believe that they could have handled the situation differently, especially in terms of balancing enforcement with compassion or rehabilitation instead?
Yes, I think you framed it quite correctly. You know, this is a problem that's not unique to South Africa. It's prevalent in many African countries where minerals are present, and the responsibility for ensuring that these things are handled properly rests in part with the state and in part with the mining companies who ceased mining in those particular areas and were supposed to have sealed things properly. Now, what we have is an untenable situation where the community is not being involved by the law enforcement people, where community-focused endeavors that could unlock this logjam are not being addressed. Instead, we have comments from government which says starve them and smoke them out, which results yesterday in 27 bodies, I think, being brought to the surface. This is an untenable situation. It is, yes, these people are behaving in a criminally irresponsible way. But the measures that are taken post facto to deal with this are not measures which anyone should be proud of. When bodies by the score are being brought up and people underneath are living in inhumane conditions. There are reports even of cannibalism of dead bodies by people beneath to survive. It is a government needs to be far more fleet of foot and far more compassionate, as well as being firm, to ensure that this happens. South Africa's mining industry is one of the oldest mining industries in modern times, and it has had many years to modernize itself and to develop proper legislative and company-wide attitudes and approaches to dealing with things. To live with this almost medieval situation and the response thereto is not particularly wise.
Okay. You know, the talk of cannibalism, you know, actually shook me there. But let's hear from Mr. Ntshona. Mr. Ntshona, if you can hear me, there's no doubt that this tragic situation has exposed the human cost of illegal mining. What do you think drives people to take such dangerous risks, you know, knowing the potential consequences?
Thank you so much. Good day to you and the viewers. Well, for the African Transformation Movement, we believe that truly the challenges that are faced by people drive them to make such decisions. Maybe the issues of inequality, the issues of poverty, the issues of a lack of employment, But though I feel in the South African context, more than just that, it is the creation of a conducive environment by the current government that allows people to actually come. When you do not mend your borders, people can just cross over whenever they please. And you do not monitor the rehabilitation of these mines and the closure of these mines. And there is a market out there that is ready to take minerals from this country. You have created a conducive environment where individuals can actually participate and knowing that they could gain from this. So from a South African perspective, even though that there is prevalence of poverty, unemployment, and all of these things in the African continent, but also I believe it is the dismal failure of the government that has created a conducive environment for people to see South Africa as a haven of looters who saw it prudent to come to South Africa. And those who may have actually abdicated their responsibility to actually acquire the minerals in a legal way, and they then create alternative markets. And therefore, the demand is there, the environment is conducive, the enforcement is not there, and that actually drives people towards such practices which are illegal.
Okay. Now, back to you, Kachalia. We've seen growing frustration, with government policies, and you did talk about it, especially around illegal mining, with accusations of an overreach. Do you think that this crisis will affect the political landscape and also influence public opinion on government effectiveness?
Let me take a step back and just react to what the gentleman from the ATM has said. I agree with a lot of what he said, but when it comes to laying the blame largely on people from outside South Africa, on migrants coming in, I think that is cheap politicking to a degree. It's very easy to do that and very easy to gain votes in this country, sadly, when you do that sort of thing. However, let us not forget that this country's mineral wealth in the mining industry was built on migrant workers from this country, migrant workers from Lesotho, from Swaziland, from Mozambique, countries that are sovereign and independent and adjacent to us. Those people, it's an interconnected economy, and what happens here has to be looked at through that interconnected frame. We cannot absolve ourselves of that situation and just say that it is a failure to address the migrant worker issue or illegal migrants coming in. Secondly, the market that's created and controlled to sell these illegal goods is not controlled by these pitiful poor people who are trying to eke a living and scrabble 2 kilometers underground with shovels in their hands to dig out gold, which is then used and sold on the international market by financiers who are large financiers who cut corners, traverse governments, and are actually in cahoots sometimes with people in government. That is the issue. So let's not shift the blame to these poor people underground and starve and smoke them out as the police are doing.
All right, Mr. Ntshona, aside the 60 bodies recovered, reports still say that the toll could rise further. How do you assess the impact of such events on both the miners and also the broader community?
Thank you so much. If I may just backtrack a little, I place the blame on the government creating a conducive environment for individuals to see South Africa as a haven of looters. I am not saying that the people who actually cross the borders are entirely the ones who should be blamed. The government is not mending the borders, and therefore that creates an influx. The government is not chasing after the companies that should rehabilitate the mines and close them. So the government of the ANC and the DA-led coalition are the ones who are creating the problem for not mending these two issues. And also, I did not say that the demand is created by the very miners who go underground. No, I also agree with my fellow panelists there that there are individuals who do not want to go the legal route in actually acquiring these minerals. They are creating the demand. So I'm not saying that the migrants are the ones. I'm saying the government of South Africa is responsible. And also the companies who must be evaluated and monitored by the government are also responsible. But at the end of the day, the government should have ensured that those mines are closed before those companies packed and leave. When it comes to the impact
yeah.
of this on the economy.
Please go ahead. Go ahead with the impact of, the events on miners and also the community.
All right, thank you so much. When it comes to the way the South African government actually acted on this matter, it is truly abdicating responsibility. They wanted to say it was all miners, and they never did anything. They did not create a conducive environment, and therefore they could smoke people out. They could deprive people of humane ways of living. They could strip them of their dignity because they say they shouldn't have been there in the first place. Yes, they are right. They should have been there in the first place, but you created as a government a conducive environment for that to occur. Now you can't say when it is at your doorstep, you have no responsibility to it. You have a responsibility. If you would have stopped these individuals from, one, coming in the country illegally. We don't have a problem with people coming in the country legally, but if they come illegally because you do not mend the porous borders, it is your problem as a government. Number two, if you do not make sure that these companies close, it is your problem as a government. So you can't then say, I'm going to strip them of their dignity as if you did not partake actively as a government in the creation of that conducive environment. So for us as the African Transformation Movement, we say the crisis that has led as of 1:30 today to 168 individuals coming out of the mines and 78 of them dead. It is solely on the shoulders of the South African government that has created the crisis. And therefore, for each and every soul, the government must account.
Okay. Back to you, Mr. Kachalia. Now, I know you did touch on, and you responded to the criticism that the authorities have focused too much on criminalizing the miners, rather than addressing the systemic issues that drive these people into these dangerous situations. Now, critics also argue, that the government's actions in Stilfontein may unintentionally push illegal miners deeper into dangerous, unregulated mines. Do you agree with this?
Look, it's a very real problem. That certainly is a scenario. I agree that it rests on the shoulders of government and control and legislation of the companies who have profitably mined these mines over many years at super profit rates to ensure that these mines are properly policed and that they are closed and that everything is in place to ensure that this does not happen and that policing happens at that level, and the burden is met both by government policing and by the miners in terms of financing these issues, the legitimate miners who've closed up operations to finance those particular issues. That's absolutely correct, and that needs to happen. I have no qualms about that, and the blame must be shouldered by government in that regard. Also, the crass policing methods that are currently underway must also be under scrutiny by human rights organizations, because, as I said, this is untenable. But when it comes to policing our borders, we have a border which runs from Mozambique in the east across the continent to Namibia in the west. We have a sea border which traverses it going south from the border with Namibia right up to the border of with Mozambique. As borders go, these are amongst the largest and biggest borders in the world. To police those borders adequately and completely is frankly not possible. It needs to be done in a more systemic manner, where there is large influx, where there is corruption allowing people to come in, where all those things can be put in place. Those holes need to be plugged. But when you plug one hole, another hole appears. That is the nature of this thing. As I referred to earlier, there needs to be a SADC-wise intergovernmental approach to this to ensure that what we are doing is uplifting our people in this part of the world. Because if you do not uplift them, these problems will persist. If these problems persist and you have governments which are not acting responsibly and not acting proactively, and you have governments and companies who are abandoning their responsibilities in some ways, and then when the crisis happens, they behave in a draconian fashion, then this is something which will continue. It has to be dealt with and prioritized both at a local, a national, provincial, and intergovernmental SADC level. These are very important.
An example is, where the Minister Ghaleb said that the siege, he described the siege as a war on the economy. But for the people involved, it's often their only means of survival. So many people have questioned, how this rhetoric has been interpreted. And do you still think that there is a disconnect between the way that the government views the issue and also the lives or the lived reality of those involved in the illegal mining?
Well, there's a clear disconnect. Minister Mantashe is, to use the often used phrase, out to lunch. He is shooting from the hip and being provocative in the extreme without being responsible. Minister Ntshona, who's the police minister, I'm surprised at, because he began his tenure in a reasonably responsible way, but has been sucked into a reaction which is unsupportable in many ways. The proof is on the ground. These ministers were booed and chased away. Hardly surprising when the community sees its people coming up in plastic bags or to be put in plastic bags because they are dead and they are rotting.
All right, now let's hear from Ntshona. Ntshona, is there an opportunity here for, cross-party collaboration to create better long-term solutions?
Almost definitely. You know what the results of the recent elections provided us is an opportunity of working together. It's an opportunity to try and change the narrative of this country. Is an opportunity to acknowledge the expertise that are found from a different political party so as we are able to move forward, instead of a community where all individuals are just pulling towards themselves. But now it is how we actually make use of that opportunity that is going to actually deliver us to the ideal. The ideal is to find solutions for such problems in our society. And we believe that the collective effort of every political party, and also the thinking that because I am a ruling party, I have the monopoly of thinking and coming up with solutions. If we can put that aside, we would see where the holes are and we'll be able to deal with them. And not only that, we'll be able to deal with not only problems in the interim or today, but also seeing how we can permanently deal with such problems so that we do not find ourselves facing such problems in the near future.
All right. Now, just before we wrap up, Mr. Kachalia, given the deep poverty in these mining areas, should South African mining laws be revised to allow for more community-based mining operations, provided that they adhere to safety standards?
Yes, of course, there needs to be an involvement of the community at that level. The trouble is that the involvement of the community at that level and the involvement of other individuals, local individuals in these very costly operations, exploration and then mining, these are not cheaply run operations, result in it being collared by elites in this country rather than communities who are deserving. The communities suck the hind tit, as it were, while the elites ride the high horse. That is not acceptable.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I think we have come to the end of the conversation. But just before we go, let's hear your final thoughts as well, Mr. Ntshona.
Thank you so much. It is going to be important for the government of South Africa not to abdicate their responsibility in ensuring that we create a conducive environment to deal with this issue. Not only that, there is another aspect which we feel that must be taken into consideration. These towns where the mines were, they suffer when these mines close down. We need to have an honest conversation with those communities and see how we can create opportunities for the people there. There's no way that the people who are living in that area did not know of the activities that were taking place. But individuals may not be interested because there could be a benefit to them by those individuals who are there, who are going to need all kinds of supplies, and the community will be there to actually support them. So the government must also go to these communities and see how we can actually deal with the issue of the exit of the mines, which then leave these communities impoverished.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the conversation this evening. Ghaleb Kachalia, former Shadow Minister, Parliament of the Republic of South Africa from Johannesburg, and also Zama Ntshona, National Spokesperson, African Transformative Movement from Johannesburg as well. We appreciate you for your time.
Thank you.